In the summer of 1999, leaders from India and Pakistan were publicly shaking hands. On the surface, peace talks were progressing, creating a powerful illusion of stability. But miles away, high in the Himalayas, a completely different reality was unfolding. Under the cover of winter, a massive military force was quietly moving into position at lethal altitudes up to 18,000 feet. This 3D topographical map shows the specific logic behind the incursion. The invading forces targeted the commanding heights, establishing an extreme vertical advantage over the valley below. The target was Highway 1A, the primary lifeline connecting Srinagar to Leh. By holding those towering peaks, the occupying forces created a massive threat zone, capable of cutting off that highway with directed artillery fire. They had achieved a textbook strategic advantage. While the opposing army was looking away, they secured total high ground dominance. It wasn't until May that local shepherds finally spotted unusual movement on the ice. It took time for the Indian military to investigate and realize this was a highly organized occupation. In response, the army launched Operation Vijay. The first massive test was a peak called Tolaling. Initially, the military approached this problem through standard doctrine, assuming they could clear the mountain with a conventional direct assault. But the physical geometry of the battlefield made that nearly impossible. Imagine soldiers trying to climb steep, rocky inclines pitched at 70 degrees. They were moving incredibly slowly in thin air, completely exposed to machine guns firing down from entrenched positions above. Relying on standard military doctrine against an entrenched, elevated enemy resulted in devastating losses. From the bottom of the valley, the high ground appeared entirely invincible. Recognizing the mounting casualties, the Indian commanders halted the frontal assaults. They completely overhauled their approach to the mountain. They shifted tactics entirely, moving away from large daytime charges. Instead, they began sending small, specialized climbing squads straight up the rock faces under the cover of absolute darkness. But as these squads moved up, a strange reality began to emerge. If the Pakistani forces held the ultimate high ground advantage, why was their strength slowly waning? The answer was an invisible, catastrophic failure of logistics. The occupying troops had no reliable way to rotate exhausted men off the peaks, and they were rapidly burning through their limited stockpiles of food and ammunition. Extreme elevation without a continuous supply chain becomes a freezing, isolated prison. Altitude cannot sustain itself. While the enemy starved at the top, India was methodically converting the valley floor into a massive logistical engine. They established a wall of heavy artillery down below, allowing them to lay down continuous, sustained suppressing fire to pin the enemy to the peaks. Above the guns, they built a relentless aerial supply chain. Heavy-lift helicopters hauled massive cargo nets into the mountains, ensuring the climbing squads never ran out of critical resources. The nature of the war had shifted. Quick tactical strikes were out. This was now a grueling war of endurance, math, and resource management. Military dominance ultimately favored the army with the heaviest, most continuous pipeline of supplies. All of this tactical adaptation culminated at Tiger Hill. It was the most imposing peak of the conflict, and it served as the final test for India's night-climbing, logistically backed strategy. Looking at this map of enemy defenses, you see the fifth major strategic shift: abandoning single-point attacks. Troops scaled the surrounding rocks in darkness, completely bypassing the main line and striking from the rear and sides simultaneously. Altitude provides zero tactical security when the enemy attacks from a blind spot. Cut off from supplies and surrounded from the rear, the remaining Pakistani outposts rapidly collapsed. By July 1999, the operation succeeded. India reclaimed the majority of the high peaks, breaking the occupation and securing the valley. But buying back that frozen rock required a devastating toll, costing the lives of more than 500 Indian soldiers. The invading forces bet heavily on the concept of timing over power, striking fast while the enemy was distracted. But they misunderstood India's capacity to react, and they failed to build the long-term sustainment required to survive. The Kargil War proves that the initial element of surprise and the advantage of elevation are temporary illusions. Ultimate victory is decided by continuity, physical endurance, and the invisible power of logistics.